Well, it has succeeded in doing a number of things, and one of them, in my view, is the processes leading to the judgment. I think on the 15th of December 2021, I did a post titled Twist and Turns in the Agyapong case, and I detailed how a certain judge was transferred from the case, an interim one was brought, and when a substantive judge was appointed, Agyapong wrote to the Chief Justice saying that he needed the interim one to come back and continue. The Chief Justice granted this request without recourse to the other side of the case. And later in court, when they raised concerns, this current judge, Justice Eric Ba, actually said that the plaintiff needed to have been notified, even in Agyapong's petition to the Chief Justice, and then the Chief Justice's response, but that did not happen. So if you add that to the troubling aspect of the judgment, which Honorable Dafiama Kor has spoken so eloquently, I think that the ordinary person out there reading the judgment seems to have concerns that was this really something that was done purely based on the law, or there was an attempt to teach someone a lesson? So that is the perception among some people, and I also find parts of the language very troubling. Something emotional and tends to betray someone's real motive. So that is the basis for this article. But if you want to look at the issue in relation to investigative journalism, I think that going forward, a number of things are going to happen. One, those of us in this generation, Anas Arimio Anas is the face of investigative journalism for us. He started doing great stories whilst I was in the senior high school, and a lot of those who are doing it looked up to him even whilst we're in journalism school. I remember as the SRC president of GIJ, I invited him to come and speak to students and all of that. So when these things are happening, it will affect the confidence of a number of journalists, not only in Ghana, but also in Africa and some parts of the world. That having said, the other thing that it should do for me is to refine the trade, because I will concede that we are not perfect. We have people who criticize us maliciously, some constructively, and some for different other reasons. What that does is that you look within yourself and ask, is there something that I can do about the method? Is there something I can do about my practice? So I believe the next generation of investigative journalists should begin to take not only the judgment, but the issues that have been raised, because the judgment, for some of them, I cannot speak to because I wasn't part of those investigations Anas did, and I have no idea who he met and what happened. So for some of the specific details and allegations, I think it will be inappropriate for me to want to speak to them. But generally, going forward, if there are lessons we should learn, and this did not only start with Agyapong, Martin Amidu started a crusade and made a number of comments. So all of that, if you are an investigative journalist, what you should ask yourself is, going forward, what can I do? What can I pick from some of these public commentary? I don't think undercover method is wrong. It isn't wrong. All over the world, it is used. Even state security agencies use it. Not long ago, IOCO and the Medical and Dental Council used it to be able to get people who were selling babies at the hospitals. So there's nothing wrong with undercover method. What can be wrong with undercover method, and sometimes it happens across the world, is entrapment and inducing evidence. I recently launched a book titled Investigative Journalism in Africa, a practical manual. And it is one of the things I discussed in that book. And my point is, when it comes to giving money in an investigation, for instance, a company has been set up and they are taking government contracts and selling. Those who buy these contracts and execute will never go forward to report this company because they are benefiting. There are certain types of corruption they call collusive corruption. Both the giver and the receiver, they benefit. So neither of them would go out there and reveal what happens within this trade. So to be able to infiltrate, you need to go in there and express interest in the contract. This is where the undercover work comes in. And because it involves selling, money has to change hands. But my policy is that don't give money unless it is demanded. If you are into undercover investigation and then you go to meet somebody and there has to be some sale or exchange of money, don't give money until it is demanded. And sometimes the quantum of the money can even induce evidence which may not naturally have been available. So you want to establish that some prisons officers in the Sawam sell narcotics to or weed to some prisoners. Then you go there as an undercover agent and then you present 10,000 US dollars that if you're able to get weed to this person, I will pay you this amount of money. The prisons officer you speak to may not ordinarily be engaged in selling narcotics, but 10,000 US dollars may be too tempting to ignore. I'm not saying taking that money is right, but the amount of money, the quantum of money does not measure up with the kind of service you want the person to do. So that may end up inducing evidence which ordinarily wouldn't have been available. So this is it. Finally, I also believe in doing this kind of work, the fact that money changes hands does not necessarily mean corruption has happened. So if you want to establish whether or not the person is corrupt and in that act, at least there should be some prima facie evidence, what the lawyers call prima facie, meaning some bit of evidence that the person is already into that. And when you approach them, there should be a clear discussion of why they are demanding the money and what they intend to do after demanding it. And sometimes it isn't even enough to give the money or pay the money they are demanding, but you have to follow through and then get evidence of what they intend to do, so that when the story comes out, it should be conclusive. And finally, you do not also have to just give the money, record, but also give everybody the right of response. That we came to do this undercover, ABC, you were caught, you were doing this. Can you respond to the issues? I have had some people say, well, the person has already been captured and there's no doubt that he or she is the one in the video. But I often ask students I teach that granted that the person in the video is the one and what they are doing is not in doubt. If, for instance, you recorded somebody defecating and then you are doing a story about open defecation, and you grant this person the right of response, and they admit that they were the one maybe squatting behind a certain building doing it, but they show you at the time they had just left the hospital and had been diagnosed of acute diarrhea, and then they show you the diagnosis, the medicine and everything, and it corresponds with what they are saying. would you still go ahead and put this person on television? And they say no. And I say, well, the facts have not changed, but just by listening to the other side, you may have got some understanding that shows that the person is not involved in something that you should put out. So what I am saying is that going forward, we journalists, investigative journalists, those of us who want to go undercover, an undercover method is not wrong, but it should be guided by some ethics so that it will reduce the kinds of things people say about our work, whether your work is genuine or not, whether you are incorruptible or not. If you are into this kind of journalism that is putting people in jail, that is getting people out of jobs, that is making people lose contracts. I remember the GGA of all organizations issued a press statement against me because a story I did led to the cancellation of a $74 million contract awarded to the Just Support Group. It was a fraudulent contract and nobody pointed to any ethical breach. But you had the GGA writing a press statement against me. So if you are into this kind of investigation, a whole lot of things will be said about you and your work. A whole manner of allegations will be made against you. But we should do it to the best of our knowledge, the best of the application of the ethics, the best of our conscience, so that even if someone accuses you of anything, you should know that between you and your God, what you have done is clean, credible, and devoid of any malice. So going forward, I think this is what should guide us, because in every situation, whether good or bad, there are lessons we can learn. And I agree with the previous speaker that we cannot allow investigative reporting to die. It will be suicidal for us. The works of Manasseh, works I have done, have sent people to jail for corruption. But let's ask ourselves, the very disturbing reports from the Auditor General we find every year, how many people have gone to jail? How many people have been tried? How many top officials have lost their jobs? So investigative journalism in some way is doing more than what some state institutions paid and funded with our taxes are supposed to do. So we should be careful not to use this as an opportunity. There are people who are always looking out to discredit journalists and this critical form of reporting. And judgments like this have come to weaponize them. And so it will be a difficult time for all persons involved in this kind of journalism in this country and perhaps beyond. But I think we should look at the lessons, refine our ways, improve upon what we are already doing, and forge ahead in the interest of our dear republic.
And Manasseh, thank you. You, while talking, you make reference continuously to the ethics, even though you employ undercover means in journalism. It must be guided by the ethics. And when you make reference to Justice Eric Barnes, some of his pronouncements, he made reference to ethics as well. I see this on page 43 of the judgment. Okay, so taking into consideration your reference to the ethics, even with the employment of undercover journalism, where do we draw that fine line between the modus employed, that's the method employed in undercover journalism, and then also the ethics that you talk about, regardless, as lawyer talked about, even if the method employed is entrapment, the outcome of it is what the court is looking out for. And in most of analysis cases, if not all, the larger interest of the public is upheld. So when this case came up, a number of people who spoke during the week made reference to you, that you also do investigative journalism. You expose the rot in society in the interest of the public, which has sent people to jail, caused people to lose corrupt money, which you made reference to. But then you don't employ these other, what has been described as unorthodox means. How do we draw that fine, thin line between employing these methods of undercover journalism and upholding the ethics that you talk about?
Okay, I must say that investigative journalism involves an orthodox method. If you read journalism code of conducts across the world, they all emphasize that the straightforward means of gathering information is the preferred and orthodox and natural method that journalists should use. But they make exceptions that if you cannot use the straightforward means to get information or evidence, and if that piece of evidence or the story you intend to tell has overriding public interest considerations, you can use the unorthodox method. So if you want to go undercover, if you are recording someone without their consent, it is an unorthodox method. But within the unorthodox method, then the ethics should apply. There are people who believe that, well, once you veer into the arena of investigative reporting or undercover journalism, you should not worry about how you get the evidence. They claim the end justifies the means. I do not subscribe to this kind of journalism because sometimes you look at society, and I've just made an example of you secretly recording somebody and going out to play. But after playing, if you didn't give this person the right of response, which is an ethical requirement, after playing and embarrassing the person, you get to know that this person was diagnosed of acute diarrhea. Would you say the end has justified the means? I don't think so. Besides, you also look at, we are all human beings first before journalists. So the biblical principle that do unto others as you have them do to you should apply. And let me give you this example. I said it at my book launch recently, that in 2017, I was doing a story and I went to Nanakomia because I needed some evaluation documents on the Metro Mass buses, which the STC had done. Nanakomia is the managing director of STC. There was a man with him, a top member of one of the security agencies in Ghana. And when he saw me, that was the first time he was meeting me. So he said, are you the one we were coming to arrest? And I said, arrest for what? And this man said, well, he had led a team from the security agency he was working for to arrest me for extortion. And this was 3 or 4 years back. So I asked him where, and he mentioned the name of a private company that had sent a report that I was coming to extort money. So they laid ambush to arrest me once I stepped out of the building with a cash in hand.
I see.
And what really happened in this company was, it was when I was investigating the Judas scandal, my very first investigation. I went to do an interview, and after that, they handed a fat envelope to me with money. I don't know whether it was US dollars or cedis, that the CEO of the company, who was at the time out of the country, said they should give it to me. And I said, no, I couldn't accept this. I didn't tell them it was a bribe, but I knew it was, because I cannot take money from somebody I'm investigating. There's no way that money would be a genuine gift, even if the person intended to give me a gift. So they forced and forced, to the extent that they wanted me to speak on phone to the CEO because he would think that they did not convince me enough. I said, just tell him, I thank him, but I couldn't take the money. So while I was being almost forced to take this money, some people from the state security agencies were laying ambush to arrest me once I stepped out with this money. I could have taken this money as evidence of they wanting to compromise me, or as exhibits or anything. But if I had been handcuffed and the story went out there that Manasseh went to extort money, he was arrested, the money is in his hands, whatever explanation or excuse I would give would never be accepted. And that happened to be my very first investigation. That would have been the end of my journalism career. My employers may even have fired me if that had happened. With this and other experiences, I cannot stand somewhere and defend the principle or the assertion that once you have taken the money, it means you are corrupt. I did not take it, but some may take it for different reasons, including the fact that maybe that person was not corrupt, but that day his or his wife was in the hospital and then was dying, and there was some payment that needed to be done, and the person didn't request they was given this money, and for that reason they took it. We also have a culture here of gift giving. If you even look at the American presidents, when they visit other countries and they are giving gifts, they are not supposed to take it, but when they take it, they justify that failure to accept it would embarrass the host, including gifts they took from Ghana.
Right.
So what I'm trying to say is that if you are into this kind of journalism, the fact that money has changed hands is not enough evidence that the person is corrupt or the person has done wrong. The fact that you've recorded a person doesn't say everything about the story. You need to apply ethics in this kind of reporting even more vigorously than the normal routine reporting, because the implications of this kind of journalism is dire. Some people will go to jail, people will lose their jobs, some people will die as a result of it, some people's reputations will be damaged. So I do not think that ethics shouldn't apply. It is not a thin line between ethics and undercover reporting. The line is very broad. It should never be blurred. And if you are in doubt about a person's culpability, it is better to take them out than to push them in there and then get them embarrassed. And sometimes I call something minimizing harm. When I was doing the robbing the assemblies, I secretly recorded Zoom Lions district and regional managers who were speaking so ill of the company that I take the money, doesn't even give it to them in the regions to do the work. But when I came back to Accra, I realized that I could tell the story without publishing their voices. Once I did that, these people were going to lose their jobs and livelihoods. But the story could have been told without putting them in trouble. So I took all of them out and went on to do my story. They kept their jobs, and I'm still doing my journalism because they were not those who initiated the contract. The contracts were initiated between management of Zoom Lion and government officials. So when you are doing this kind of job, I think that we need to be very careful so that when the story comes out, if somebody is going to jail, they are going to jail for something they know, even if they will not admit it publicly. Deep down within their heart, they will praise you. When Abu Gapele came out of jail, and he was granted an interview in Bolga, and they asked him about me, he told them that, well, he respects the kind of work I do, and he doesn't have anything against me, even though he went to jail for a story I did. So this is what I think we should do when we talk about ethics. Okay. That is not to say that I agree with everything in the judgment.
All right. Great.